unusually quiet. I'm just checking in to make sure that I'm not missing anything. Great. Thanks, Brian.
Brian, can you hear me all right? This is Andy Tights. Yep, I see the thumb.
Yep.
Okay.
I got you.
Let's see, we have 1, 2, 3, 4. Do we know if Andy is going to join?
I can only say that I had trouble getting in off the agenda.
I did too.
So he had trouble last time he tried to come in off the agenda, as I remember. I finally came in under the
That may be him.
notice. What?
This may be him.
Yeah, I don't know who the caller is from number 1777. If you could identify yourself, you'll need to unmute.
Yep, this is Rob Arnold from 2545 Kingstown Road.
Okay, welcome, Rob.
Thank you. Yeah, I tried to log in via Zoom, and same thing. I heard you guys saying that people are having trouble off the agenda. That's where I was trying to get in as well.
Okay, I can resend you the link through Zoom. Let me do that.
Okay.
You might
Just-
want to try
Just for
Andrew
the
as
record,
well.
I had no trouble with Zoom just typing in the webinar ID.
Yeah.
Oh, gotcha. Okay.
Tell me when you're ready, Brian.
Just give me
Take
a
your time.
second.
Fine.
All right, Rob, you should be getting a link directly from Zoom. Hopefully that'll work a little bit better than the agenda.
Gotcha. I will. I'm actually typing in the webinar ID right now, so I will see if this works.
And I did resend the link to Andrew Martinez as well.
Okay, well, I think we should go ahead and call the meeting to order. Since we do have a quorum and people, are gonna be ready soon to talk to us. I'll call the March 24th, 2022 meeting of the South Kingstown Historic District Commission to order. And take the roll. Karen De Silva.
Here.
Marie Gates.
Here.
Andrew Martinez. Absent. Linda Stedman.
Here.
Rich Youngkin.
Here.
Youngkin, and Shantia Anderhagen present. First up, we have the approval of our January 27th, 2022 minutes of the South Kingston Historic District Commission. Do I hear a motion to approve those minutes?
I just have one comment on them, if I may.
Sure, let's get a motion in a second and then we can
Okay.
discuss them.
I'll make a motion to approve.
Is there a second?
Second from Murray.
Thanks, Murray. Linda?
I just, on item 6, B for the historic documents, it mentions that I discussed the difficulty of keeping the public out of the historic public documents. I don't want it to be misconstrued that we're trying to keep the public out of it, just that we're trying to keep the records safe, and it's hard. Sometimes it seems hard to protect them. And there maybe should be a better way of protecting them while they're being used.
Okay. Brian, can you make a note that,
I
or
c- I
actually
can-
Linda?
I will include a note in this month's minutes, but when we add information to what was from the previous meeting, it's not correct to go back and correct those minutes directly. So I will
Okay.
make sure that's contained in the current minutes.
Thank you.
Any other comments? Number 10, Brian, adjournment. Ms. Anderhagen? Any other comments? Okay, we have a motion on the
Oops,
table
sorry.
and a second. All in favor?
Aye.
I,
Opposed? The motion carries and Andrew has joined us. Okay, I don't see that Rob has joined yet. And the next agenda item, the first agenda item or next agenda item is 2445
Yep.
Kingstown Road.
I do, hold on, I just need to promote him. He's in the attendees list. So give it a second. There he goes. And there he is.
Great. We'll just let him come on. Great.
You got me.
Okay, so this is 2545 Kingstown Road, the Asa Potter House. And what we have are outstanding zoning violations that exist on this property, which is located in the Kingston Historic District at Assessors Parcel 23-3, Lot 43. So in brief, and I think just to remind us all, we have 2 certificates of appropriateness for required work on this building that were recorded on May 4th, 2021. These certificate of appropriateness issues actually stem back to previous COA in 2011, and which had actually been outstanding at the time of that COA issuance. There was no deadline established. The property transferred into new ownership on June 16th, 2021, and the outstanding obligations under the COAs transferred to the new owners. On August 26, 2021, the owner was notified that a lack of action on those 2021 COAs had resulted in the property being in violation of zoning ordinance 600.4. Further deadlines were imposed that haven't been met. However, no fines have been incurred by the owner thus far. There have been emails between planning staff, the owner and the owner's representatives, which have been shared with the Historic District Commission members, as have just this morning plans for proposed work on the balustrade, east porch, and an understanding of what's happening at the front door side lights. So I'd first like to ask representatives of the owner or the owner himself to, first of all, welcome. Thanks for coming to the meeting, Rob.
Thank you.
I think we have all read the correspondence that you have had with the staff. And so I think this evening, what we really would like to hear from you about is what your, first of all, what the holdup has been and what your plans are moving forward. I think I would encourage all of us, I did give brief background, but if we can stick to where are we heading, what's
Sure.
happened and where are we heading?
Sure. So where we're at today. So I had had a couple of things personally going on the last couple of months. I had a meeting with Richard and Brian back in, I believe it was December, or even prior to that. It was prior to that. And the goal was to get some more detailed plans for everybody, just so everybody's more crystal clear on what needs to happen. I think I was left a couple photos and nothing to replicate. So nothing physical to replicate. So we're trying to reestablish or replicate based on some old photos and you know, my first designer didn't do the best job and have since hired an engineer to recreate as closely as possible. What I guess what we can gather from this is, you know, regarding the balustrade there, recreating as close as possible based off the photos, images, scaling on past photos, etc. You can see the plans that were submitted, a lot more detailed, a lot clearer for everybody to understand. And at this time, we're looking at a schedule of around it'd be the first week of May. So it'd be the 2nd of May to around the 24th of May is the time that I've got scheduled aside with the construction crew to get the balustrade complete.
Okay.
Pending everybody's thumbs up on the drawings and design.
Okay, thanks. And where are you on the east porch reconstruction?
The east porch, that would all be tied into the
Okay.
the timeline would all happen together.
Okay, and finally, the side lights?
The side lights, so the side lights we've got, they've been sitting with a company that happens to be a friend of mine, so he's kind of put me on the back burner, to be very honest. But he is recreating the side lights as closely as possible. He has the originals. They're in several pieces, but he's, you know, it is getting recreated. I don't have an update on that piece in particular, but I can get an update soon.
And so, thank you. I think my understanding was that the side lights were actually going to be repaired. So I'd like to ask, before we open this up to the full commission for discussion, I'd like to ask Rich Youngkin, our vice chair. You, Rich, and Brian met with Rob on site, I think, at some point in November. What can you tell us about that meeting and your understanding of things?
All right, this is Richard Youngkin. I have some notes on that meeting. Brian and I met with Rob Arnold on November 3rd about the project, and I think the meeting was just to, Rob wanted the meeting, we wanted the meeting to just see what progress was going on then, and also I think Rob had there was some back and forth about details on the balustrade drawings that he had at that time and some other evidence that he had found at the building. I'll just go quickly through my notes from that meeting. We were led to understand, excuse me, my screen has gone off, here it goes, that the side lights were at a fabricator that Rob had. And again, I think this is the same person that he just described. And that we were led to believe that the side lights were going to be repaired, that it was actually like a restoration or repair of the existing fabric, although existing, I think that Rob made it clear to us, we weren't able to see anything because those had already left the house, but they were in bad condition. And so I was led to believe that perhaps it was extensive, the repair job. We discussed what would happen after he got those back, and that we would come back to the house and look very carefully at the insulation issues on either side of the front door. Obviously, this would be different than what had been approved at the meeting, because they weren't going to be wholly new. They were going to be sort of replicating or reconstructing or repairing the existing sidelights, historic sidelights, using all the dimensions that are part of that, the configuration, the cane size, the glass profile and glass thickness, all of that. We also talked about the lattice screen and on the porch, and that Rob had found some additional evidence in the porch flooring that indicated a different kind of a mounting scenario or location scenario for the arched entryway than we had thought. It all looked like good evidence in the floor, and he was going to modify the plans to accommodate that evidence and compare it with the photographic evidence that we do have. I think he was very clear about the fact that the lattice would change from the vertical horizontal to the diagonal as in the original configuration. I don't think we had clear drawings about what that would actually look like at that point that he was working on that. On the balustrade, I think I got the feeling that there had been confusion about the date of the house and the style of the balustrade, perhaps from prior owners' information, and also some information that sort of is available locally. So we went through the house a little bit on the first floor to look at the stylistic elements of the house to make sure that the balustrade was in fact an original feature of the house, and that our summation that it was a federal style house, grand federal style house with a balustrade was accurate. And I think we kind of nailed that in fact, it's not a Georgian 18th century house, it's a federal style early 19th century house, as the inventory indicates. And the balustrade was a feature of the house originally. We, I think, had a prior drawing that showed a more angular style that Rob was exploring. We advised that the photographic evidence showed not such an angular stylistic configuration in terms of the cutout design, that it was more rounded, and that he should go back to the historical photograph as he proceeded with the drawings, and that he should look carefully at Judge Indeglia's balustrade, which is just a few houses up at the Hagedorn House, and as a model. That all three balustrades that exist or that existed in Kingston on these federal houses, the three grand federal houses, were different. That he should look at the historical photograph. We talked about the mounting system that he's thinking about, which I think is an aluminum mounting system, the brackets that would hold the balustrade. That seemed to be acceptable if he could make sure that the roof was not going to get severely compromised as the structure is put together. I think we're all concerned about penetration of the roof and leakage. So that's something that he has to be very careful about. The materials for the balustrade, I think, could be some of the modern synthetic materials, because it's hard to get at, hard to paint, as long as it had structural integrity, so it didn't warp or wag like a flag in the breeze. Those are all considerations that he should be taking, and I think we advised him of that. I think he said that the aluminum parts would be panelized or cased so they wouldn't be visible. And he was also talking about a complete wraparound of the roof, as as the balustrade did originally. And we have photographic evidence of that. So we went around the house, we looked at some other features. We noticed that there were two windows in the basement on the west side that had been replaced recently. We don't know who did that, but it was not with HDC approval, and they were modern replacement windows, simulated divided lights with fake mutton bars. So that was an issue that we raised. And it was like an advisory kind of meeting. I will say that my role as the chair at that time was to help out with any design considerations on this project. I don't want to presume that I was in part of any of the enforcement issues here. That's for the zoning officer to deal with. So that's my report on that.
Thanks, Rick. Rob, do you have anything to add or clarify at the moment?
Not too much. I think if you guys notice that the drawings, they've been modified. I think Richard, you probably noticed from the last one to the new one, the newer are more as closely representative of the photos that I have of that balustrade as, you know, so we're pretty tuned in there. If there's any questions on the plans, let me know. I can answer any questions. As far as the lattice goes, one thing we did find when we were at that meeting was, if you guys remember looking at the paint, we can see exactly where the old lattice, when they removed the old lattice, they didn't paint the decking underneath where the old lattice existed. So you can actually see exactly where the old lattice slats were sitting. So we have an exact guide to go by when we recreate that lattice there.
Great, thanks. And finally, it sounds as though your intention is that the side lights, the two side lights, are being reproduced.
So why don't I get back to you guys with an update on that? That was actually, the idea was to repair the as of a couple months ago. The response was that we should recreate. It's, when I tell you these pieces were shattered and they're in a probably 10 to 15 pieces each side light, it's like putting a puzzle piece back together. And so they're a little messy. Ideally we repair, we put back the exact,
Sure.
but I don't have an update for you on that. I can get back to that.
So Rob, I think if you come back to the commission, or I think this is actually at an administrative level, you'll be working with Brian, and the vice chair and I will review as well, and then it will come back to the full commission, I believe. But what we would really like to see are photographs of the existing conditions, so that we have a sense of what these windows look like, even in pieces. In fact,
Sure.
The pieces are important.
Yeah.
And then we'll go from there. And I don't know how many people have, how many members have had a chance to review the drawings that arrived this morning. But I think I'd like to, Brian, do any of the members have questions of Rob before we begin a more?
I have one question. It's Richard Youngkin again. Rob, and for the rest of the commission, I think if we review the original decision, it was to create new reproduction sidelights and to save the pieces, the original pieces, all of them, so that there would be a record of what did exist, and your reproduction could very carefully follow those as a pattern. I know if they're all in pieces, there might be a way for the fabricator to actually review the dimensions of all those pieces and then recreate or reproduce. It's actually a reproduction because you do have enough to go by, enough evidence of the original to go by, I hope. So that was the original approval. And I think for our sake, it might be wise, I don't know about the rest of you commissioners, but it might be wise to keep with the original approval as much as possible, rather than go through another approval process for how you deal with the sidelights. Have I got that straight?
Yeah, so, because I guess the idea was there was an approval for a reproduction, so they would be brand new pieces. But
Right.
when I mentioned that, there's hope that we can repair this and use the original. That's a kind of a one up from what you guys had previously
Yeah.
approved. So the goal would be, yes, repair. It's if I can do that, and like I said, it's a friend of mine. He's a very talented fabricator. Does phenomenal work. He's put me on the back burner. I haven't caught up with him. I need to make it a priority. If the repair is possible, that is the goal. That way we have the original. If it's not, then and you get the board has already approved the replica.
I think that's right. And I think, Rob, just to understand that if it's a repair, it doesn't mean replacement of any, huge amount of material. It's using the pieces you have and selectively replacing in kind. That would be the repair that wouldn't actually have to come before the Historic District Commission.
Yeah, if I remember correctly, and I'll get the photographs for you guys as well and send them, circulate them. If I remember correctly, there were a few pieces that were missing, but it was I'd say each side light had probably 80% to 90% of all of the parts in order to make it complete. So there's some recreation that needs to happen if it can be put back together. It's 10 to 20% of each side will need to be new.
And that's in line with a repair that has selective replacement percentage wise.
Yeah, when I spoke on site, I think the bigger issue was how are we going to reinstall these? So I'm not too worried about having the physical side light inserts, but when we get to that point, we discussed having a meeting before installing them, so everybody's on the same page, because it's they're brittle as can be, and we need to be mindful of how they go back in.
I think that this can be worked out at an administrative level. Anything else, Rob, that you want to share with us before we have a discussion among the commission members?
Nothing else. I think I've got a pretty good handle on. I have all the materials ready to go. I've got the crew lined up for, as I mentioned, the first 3 or 4 weeks in May, however long it takes. So we're pretty tuned into what needs to happen over there, and feel confident we can get it done in a timeline. So should be good shape.
Thank you. Brian, we don't have any members of Brian.
Yeah, I just wanted to point out, I think Rob eventually got to what I was going to say. The concept that was discussed with the previous owners was to actually replicate the side lights in stained glass, not to redo what was there, which is basically glazed in glass, at least based on what's in the transom light, which I would assume is identical to what was in the side lights. We did not really approve that, or the Historic District Commission did not approve that, because we left it subject to submission of shop drawings.
Yes.
That needed to be consistent in terms of dimension and texture, which I'm not so sure they could have done with stained glass, but we gave them the choice. If Rob is now, if he's going to repair what's there, I think, Shanti, you said that really isn't going to need a lot of approval, but I would understand if they are very brittle and they really can't be repaired in a strong, usable way. If they're going to need to be recreated essentially from scratch, we're still going to need to see shop drawings.
Oh, yeah.
And materials and whatnot on that. So I just want to make sure that's clear. And also, Rob indicated that he's got a couple of young kids running around the house, and he wanted to install them in a way that would protect them, which is completely understandable. but we would also like to see some information on what that installation
Yeah.
is going to be. I assume we're going to be putting some protective plexi panels on one or both sides of it to make sure that it's not damaged.
So I just want, I'm looking at the certificate of appropriateness. Rob, I would point you to that to really read through what our conditions were on the May 4th, 2021. Brian, I want to say, I don't think it was stained glass. I don't think we ever, I'm not seeing the word stained glass. And so I think what you mean is individual pieces of glass that are created that create the side lights rather than a panel of glass that fakes it.
No, what I mean is that I didn't mean colored glass. I meant glass sent in an H-shaped
Yeah, the cam, like a
Cam.
lead, yeah, okay.
as
I just wanna
opposed
be
to
clear
the
that-
way this glass is more of an L-shaped cam where the glass is inserted and then glazed in.
Yeah, okay, I just want to clarify that we're not talking about, specifically not talking about color. We are talking about a method of production.
Right.
Okay. Do we have any members of the public? On our
We do
meeting?
not. We
Okay.
do not.
I'd like to now ask the commission if there are any points of discussion.
Are you looking to address one particular element, one particular recommendation, or just open to all of the?
I'm basically asking if anybody has any further, questions among ourselves about next steps, and then I'll certainly, I'd like to hear a motion.
But I did want to ask about, Richard talked about trying to remember exactly what the wording was, but that in previous discussions, and I remember this with the previous owner as well, that there was some concern around the integrity of the building itself with creating penetrating anchors for the balustrade. And looking at the design, it looks like that there is roof penetration, and I just wanted to understand what had changed to include a design, if I'm reading it correctly, that does have the penetration into the roof, and what the thought process was in arriving at that.
Well, I can answer that. These balustrades were traditionally attached to the roof by roof penetration. So this is a traditional way of installing the balustrade, and I think it's all about the flashing on the elements that penetrate the roof and how well that roof is flashed to prevent leakage. So I've talked to professionals who have worked on roofs like this with balustrades, and the traditional way of putting a balustrade on does work if the roof is properly dealt with. I don't want to talk about the prior owner's fear about that because I'm not sure I'm not sure of its accuracy at all. So I think that going back to perhaps an alternative would be to talk, as I mentioned before, to Judge Delia about how he attached his roof balustrade and how well it's performing. It's been up there for, I think, a long time now. There's also another roof balustrade on North Road that seems to be okay. So I think that it's quite possible to install the balustrade on the roof in a traditional way without serious concerns. It just has to be done properly. The other thing is that the aluminum is a substitute perhaps for wood, and it may hold up better, and there may be less of a penetration to the roof with the aluminum in terms of dimension because of its strength. That is worth considering. So these are logistics that have to be worked out, but I think hanging the thing on the roof had been talked about before. And any of these options we certainly can look at. I wanted to keep the door open to that.
if I can jump in real quick. So just, prior to the business that I own now, we were exterior contractors, and we'd probably done hundreds of roofs and siding jobs, window jobs, so on and so forth. So the last thing I want to do is penetrate the roof. In this situation, we're going to have to, in order to keep the structure solid. The way that we've designed it is that wherever you see a vertical, I guess if you're looking at the designs, wherever you see a vertical piece of trim in between the panels, doesn't necessarily mean that we have a 4x4 coming up through the roof. The way we're designing is that we're going to span the aluminum frame that Richard's talking about. The idea was fewer 4x4s penetrating the roof, use an aluminum frame that spans from 4x4 to 4x4, and then over the aluminum is the decorative facade that everybody will see. So fewer 4x4s, a structural panel joining the going from spanning 4x4 to 4x4, so that I have fewer holes put in the roof. At the end of the day, like I said, it's the last thing I want to do is put any holes in the roof. It is kind of between that and leaving enough space so we don't have any ice damming forming underneath these I say parapet wall or balustrade, a couple different terms for it. But as far as flashing the 4x4s, there are boots, flashing boots that we buy with particular membranes, and then as long as everything is flashed in properly, we shouldn't have any issues at all.
Thanks, Rob. Murray, that answer your question?
It does, thank you.
Okay, anybody else have questions? So Rob, Rich?
Nope. Well, I think we should seriously consider the deadlines, because this is, and I know that's what we want to talk about is, can we put another deadline on this, and will it work?
First I'd like to say that the details that you have been talking about, Rich, and that Rob, you've been talking about, Rob, you understand that the plans that you have turned in still need some augmentation. We need a lot of the information when you settle on what your approach is going to be. It needs to be shown on the plans in a very clear way for us to consider, in both the east porch instance and the balustrade, so that we have a set of plans that show what is actually going to happen here. It sounds like some of that is maybe still being worked out.
No, I thought we were this. I guess this is. I guess what else do we need?
Well, I think what this is going to happen let me back up and say, from my perspective, the plans need to show specifically what the materials are going to be, especially for the balustrade. I may have missed it because I was very pressed for time today, but I would encourage you to just double check all of the details on the plan. And as much information as you have shared tonight, let's make sure it's on the plans. I think submit all that material to Brian, and Brian will coordinate with the vice chair and myself to do a review and see where we stand. I'd like to ask the full commission if that approach is acceptable to them, or does the full commission want these plans back in April? Any feedback on that? Are you all comfortable with Brian working with Rich and me to get this to okay.
Yes.
Okay, is that
Karen? That's Karen said yes.
Thank you. Okay, and I see others nodding.
Yes.
And I'd like to, Rob, just because we are in an active, regrettably, still an active violation situation, I'd just like to invite Andy Tights to share with us if we cannot move forward together favorably, what happens next. And let me just, before Andy talks, let me just say, I feel encouraged by what I've heard tonight, and I believe that we will be able to move forward in a good manner on this issue. But we all need to realize that there is an issue here. Hi, Andy.
Hi, I'm not sure. My understanding from Brian and from the previous stuff is that It's staff approval for the materials here for the balustrade and that should be pretty straightforward. And it sounds like with the time frame of the plan to do it by May, that still gives the entire month of April to deal with the staff approval. So it's really just coming down to the windows, it sounds like, the side lights. I think it's kind of premature at this point. I think you don't really have a proposal before you as to what's going to be done. So let's give him a chance to find out, what can be done and come back with, some detailed information as to what would be done. Is it going to be a replacement or is it going to be a repair? Is it going to be a 90% repair? So it's essentially a replacement. But I would say, let's see what you've got before you worry about what to do. I do think, go ahead.
No, go on, Andy. Didn't mean to interrupt you.
No, I don't know that there's, at this point, there doesn't seem to be anything we can do much at this point. I think until we find out more about that.
Well, I have a couple of questions. It's Richard Youngkin again. First of all, we have the zoning officer's letter, which specifies that it's a violation, and he has not determined yet whether he's going to assess the fee, the penalty, the fine, which is $500 a day. So he hasn't really said when he's going to do that or when his patience will run out. And I sort of think that where we may not put another deadline on this, at some point our patience will run out and we may actually instruct the zoning officer to assess the fine. Now, does that sound logical to you, Andy, that that's our recourse?
Well, logical, but not necessarily correct. You don't have the authority to to tell the zoning official whether or not to do it. Although clearly we work together. What I would suggest is, why don't you put this on the agenda for your June meeting? That will do two things. By then, hopefully the work will have been done in May, and you'll get to see the work that has been done with the balustrade and the lattice work, and then at that point get an update from the applicant as to what the status is of the side windows. Now, I think if he's got information sooner and wants to come before you sooner, even at the April meeting or the May meeting, there's no reason he can't come to you sooner with whatever he's got. But my thought, that would be 3 months as a date. If he doesn't come before then, you definitely want him to come back at that point.
Okay, that's helpful. Thanks, Andy. Rich, to your point about deadlines, and with respect to Andy, what is your thinking in terms of deadlines for turning in material for staff review in conjunction with, members of the commission, and then completion of work, schedule of work, or anybody who wants to?
So I can say this. I think that Rob has his heart in this, actually. I'd like to assume he does. And that he wants to do the very best. He told us that when we went out to the house. He wants to do the very best for the house. And so what I'd like to see happen is that that Brian and Shanti and myself, we review what Rob has submitted just today or yesterday, and we get back to him fairly quickly about what the needs are, so he can proceed with the final. I guess this is the iteration of the shop drawings that will be acceptable to us. Once we approve those shop drawings, then he can go ahead with his contractor and the schedule of his contractor, keep that all in place and get this work done in May. And we will be very excited if he in fact gets it all done by the end of May, which he's hoping for. And then I don't think once it's all completed and we've signed off on it as a staff review, quote unquote, then it doesn't need to come back to the commission. If
Right.
all of that breaks apart or somehow gets, the schedule gets screwed up for any kind of reason, then we would report back and to the commission, the full commission, on what happened. And if there's anything that we find that we can't resolve amongst ourselves, the three of us, that would have to come back to the full commission as well. But that puts our faith back into Rob's hand, into Rob, and to say, in all good faith, we hope this can happen. We know it's tricky business. It's not like mowing the lawn or doing something simple. It's putting up a roof balustrade and fixing those flooded side lights. Those are the most difficult part of this. The porch lattice is pretty simple and straightforward.
Other comments or concerns?
Just from my side, I can tell you, we owned 2573 Kingstown Road. We sold it in 2018. So we had it from 08 to 2018. And if I don't know if anybody was, I can't remember who was around at the time, but we did a full exterior renovation of that home. At that time, we're not looking to skimp on anything here. We're doing this right. We're doing this one time, and hopefully with the way we're assembling this and making this happen, the goal is to make it last another 100 years, not to buy us another 20 or 30. It's do it once. Eventually we'll be moving our family into that home, and so that's the plan.
Great. Well, thank you. I'd like to ask, is there someone who can frame a motion here, please?
Well, I guess I'll make the motion that we accept a course of action now to postpone our, I guess we have standing these commitments there that were to a schedule, and we have to somehow postpone that for another 3 months to allow the shop drawings to come in and the work to be completed. And that we will, as a small committee of 3, staff, Brian, myself, and Shanti will review those drawings, and as soon as we can, and get word back to Rob on what he needs in addition, or if we're all set to go. And I think that probably is a way to frame a motion so that it captures the history, the past of this project and the deadlines that exist now, and extend them until, I think we're talking, the end of June? Does that make sense?
We have a meeting on June 23rd.
Yeah.
So I would propose that we move this deadline up just a little bit so that if we need to convene about this issue at our June meeting, we have, time to do that.
As
It'd be June
a side,
15th.
oops, sorry.
I guess it'd be June 15th then, correct?
Might I suggest May 31st, which would give us a sense, we will know then where the project stands to a great extent.
As a side note, I have to get the lattice and the roof done before in that time frame, because if I miss that with my contractors, I will probably not see them for another year. Everybody is so cranking busy right now, so I need to work very closely with you guys just to make sure we're buttoned up on the very least the lattice and the balustrade. I know I have some work and some things to get back to you guys on regarding the side lights, but when I look at the grand scheme of things, the side lights, and I know it's all important to everybody on this call, but in the grand scheme of things, getting things done, the side lights are much easier as an add-on, or I'll be able to do that. I'm not going to need to bring a crew in to handle that. It's a one-person job. So I'm worried about the lattice and the balustrade and getting that in the month of May.
And Rich, I think your motion should also include a deadline for submission of information about the side lights, just so we keep it, so that we keep, on track.
yeah, we should have the information for the sidelights. I would think by, well, do you think you'll have the information by by the April 1st? Is that too?
I sent the text here while we were on here to my friend, that's the fabricator. I'll get a response very quickly. I can get a response probably tonight, to be honest with you. I'll put a call in.
So why don't we say April 1st for that?
That's fine. Yeah.
No, as soon as possible.
Yep.
Can you restate that whole motion, Rich? So, please.
Before, I guess so before we state a motion, so I just need to, I think we've kind of gone around a couple things here. So as far as the lattice and as far as the balustrade goes, just so I'm clear, so I'll be working with you guys directly over the next several days or week, let's say week and a half, whatever it might be. We'll have a little bit of back and forth buttoning up details on those two pieces. And then from there, I have a submission from, well, it'll come from me, but information from the fabricator stating where we stand with the side lights. Am I understanding that clearly? Okay,
Yeah.
got it.
Yes.
All right.
Yeah, we're going to call those in the motion the shop drawings for these aspects, which goes back to the original approval. So
Okay.
we would, in terms of scheduling, we would expect to receive.
Rich, can you put it in the form of a motion?
So I'll
please?
make a
And
motion.
and Rob will hear it in the motion.
All right, I make a motion that that we approve an extension of the deadlines to May 31st. And that's contingent, or that's provided, or let me think now. Well, I think I'm just going to be very straightforward, that we extend the deadline to May 31st for completion of the balustrade and the lattice work elements of the project. That we have a deadline for shop drawings, final shop drawings. I think probably by April 10th. Because you're going to need those shop drawings to have everything made. That we want to have, we require that the shop drawings or the details of how you're going to approach the sidelights be available to us by April 1st. We're not going to set a date for, at this point, I think, for completion of the sidelight project. An extension of that date. Well, let's keep that open. So I think that just the extension of the dates for completion is probably enough for the motion, with the dates for these elements to be submitted to us for approval.
Andy?
Yeah, may I can I suggest May 26th, which is the date of your meeting, instead of May 31st?
Okay.
I don't think that over the Memorial Day weekend is going to make it that much of a difference time-wise. But that way you have an opportunity to meet and check on it at that time. And I just wanted to check, Richard, you were talking about shop drawings for the windows by April 1st, which is next Friday. Did you mean that, or did you mean a later time for the shop drawing for the windows?
Well, I think we need this, I guess we need by April 1st, we need to understand what the approach is going to be.
Okay. That's fine. I just wanted to clarify. I wasn't sure if you meant that or not.
I was going to ask the same question because I didn't think I was going to be doing shop drawings for this ornate stained glass, not stained glass, the ornate, the repairs. I think it was more of a communicating what the status is and what our approach will be.
Right.
I don't know.
So should we change that to a report
Yes.
on the methodology of the repair rather than a shop drawing?
All right, I'll amend my motion to say that it's a report on the methodology for the repair of this, or I think it's either repair or reproduction of the sidelights. So it covers both options that you might have. But we will need those shop drawings. You understand that. We'll need shop drawings on what you're going to do with those sidelights at some point
Well,
before
for
they have to be
reproduction.
approved. Before you initiate those sidelights, anything to be done with them physically, we need the shop drawings on how you're going to do it.
But I don't believe we need shop drawings for repair. I mean, under the bylaw, they can repair features without HTC approval. I think it's if he is reproducing.
Well, we have required in the past specifics on how various elements of buildings are to be repaired. And I don't know why we couldn't require shop drawings, because we need to know how they're actually going to go about repairing the cames and the profiles, the dimensions. That's already been part of the record on the prior approval for these windows, as I understand it.
It seems like, not for nothing, just to jump in, I don't know who's going to be doing shop drawings for designing these pieces. I wouldn't know where to go. I don't think it's an architect, and I don't think it's a.
Okay, I'm going to interrupt and say, I think where we're going to leave this is that we are asking for you to report back to the staff by, what date did we say? April 10th? Was that the date you selected, Rich?
It was April 1st.
April 1st, you're reporting back, if that's a reasonable time for you, Rob.
No problem.
What the approach is going to be at the sidelights, and we will take it from there with respect to what additional information will be needed, depending on what approach you have settled on. Is that
Perfect?
Well,
comfortable?
I'm not comfortable with that totally, but I believe that we've already specified in a prior approval exactly what we need for those sidelights in terms of drawings. So I think we'll have the report and we'll go from the report. We may have to have another meeting to decide what exactly we need in terms of drawings.
Another meeting with whom?
I would imagine if you want to change what was already approved, it'll be the full commission.
I think that the standing certificate of appropriateness did not anticipate repair. It anticipated reproduction. Yes, Brian?
Yeah,
And
pulling it up
anybody?
now.
And I think in that instance, we are on safe ground with respect to what we need for replacement sidelights. G, looking at the conditions. So the standing COA did not anticipate repair. I think if Rob is proposing repair, then repair, provided it's an in-kind repair in accordance with our standards and guidelines, does not require that material.
I think we're going to get stuck on this, and I'd like to move ahead with my motion.
Okay, do we all know what the motion is?
Can I run through what I have?
Please do, yeah.
So I have a motion to continue this discussion to the May 26th meeting which will be a deadline for completion of the work on the balustrade and the lattice. I have a deadline of April 1st for a report from Rob on the methodology of the repair or reproduction of the side light windows. And I think from there, we need to hear what the rest of the motion is going to be in terms of dealing with the windows. Shanti said that we would decide at the next opportunity after we have that report what we need for the windows, and Rich was contemplating something else with his motion, but it is Rich's motion. So.
Well, why don't I repeat the motion then, because it sounds confusing to me. The motion is to extend the deadlines that we created on May 3rd with our COAs for the balustrade and for the porch lattice work until
For the
May
completion,
26th.
for completion, because we had two sets of deadlines. We had deadlines for shop drawings and deadlines for completion.
Right, that's the deadlines for completion.
Okay.
I'm coming to that first. And second part of the motion is to extend our deadlines for completion of the shop drawings until, I think that's the April 10th. That's, I think, probably April
I'm
11th.
gonna step in and say, we need a clear motion, Rich, and I'm getting more and more confused. So, let's just take a deep breath and please, let's try to frame this. Yeah,
Do you want me to try this?
yeah, please.
I think basically it's two steps. So motion to continue the time for completion of the balustrade and the lattice to May 26th with a requirement that the finalized shop drawings for such balustrades and lattice work be submitted by April 10th. And that this would be placed on the agenda for April 26th for follow-up on the balustrade and the lattice work. And the second part would be that the date for completion of the side light windows would be continued to June, or would also be continued to May 24th, with a report on the intended methodology and clarification as to whether they will be repaired or replicated to be submitted by April 5th. I'm sorry, April 1st, period. And then you can take this up if you want on if the members aren't happy with the report and I want to deal with it more, could take it up at the April meeting if you want to take up anything before then, or take it up at the May meeting. My suggestion would be to take it up at the May meeting after the balustrade and the lattice work is done. So, take a look and see what's done before deciding the next step. But my motion would just end with the period of continuing the time to do it till May 24th and April 1st for the report on how it's going to be done.
Our meeting, Andy, is May 26th.
I'm sorry,
That's
I'm
okay.
looking at March. Yeah, May 26th, yes, May 26th is the May date.
Okay, Rich, does that capture what you intended?
Yeah, I think it does. Certainly does for the balustrade and the lattice work. We'll have the report for the side lights by April 1st on which way he wants to go. if he wants to go, if shop drawings are needed, they're going to be due by shortly thereafter. It sounds like April 11th, April 10th is a Sunday, April 11th is a Monday. So we should put April 11th for that. And there's going to be a report on that. I think Andy added that into the motion that we'd have a report before the commission on the sidelights on our meeting date, April, whatever that's April 26th, is that?
Yeah,
the
no,
meeting date?
I was leaving it as May 26th. I was not putting anything for the April meeting. That
Oh,
doesn't
okay.
mean you can't decide, Richard, when you see the report after April 1st, if you want to, if you feel it's necessary to add something to your April meeting, that doesn't preclude it, but I just wasn't including it in the motion. I thought
All
the
right.
motion could run till May 26th, and then you'll see what happens when you get it.
All right. I agree with that.
Brian, you have a clear understanding of what our motion is?
Yep.
Okay, all right. Is there a second? A second to the motion?
I'll second it.
Thank you, Karen. All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Aye. I think we should do hands. Opposed? It looks to be unanimous to me. The motion passes regardless if it's unanimous. Okay, Rob, you all set? We're gonna.
I think so. I think I've got marching orders, so well,
Call Brian. He'll clear up anything that you don't understand, and he'll be working with us to review what we have so far, let you know what else we need, and to keep this moving so you get that window of opportunity in May to have your contractors in.
thank you very much.
Okay, thanks, Rob.
All right.
Thank you,
Talk
Rob.
to you soon. All right, we'll see you.
Night.
Thanks. Bye-bye.
Thank you,
Um,
Andy.
Yeah, I assume you don't need me for the rest of the
No.
meeting?
I think we're good.
Okay, always a
Thanks,
pleasure.
Andy.
Thanks.
I've put you in May as a definite. I've changed that from a hold to a definite.
Okay,
And
thank
then
you.
just let me know as April comes up.
Brian will.
Thank you.
Thanks, Andy.
Bye.
All right, thanks, everyone. Well, that's I think some progress. Let's see, I'm gonna just shift our agenda around a little bit to address a couple of things quickly. The Linda and Andrew, can we get your report on town historic documents? Are you ready with that for this meeting?
I don't have a report on it. I know that Andrew and I met a few weeks ago. Murray was also there. He happened to be stopping by the town hall at the time. I don't know what Andrew said. He was going to come back. I don't know what his feelings were on what we discussed that day. If he
Okay.
wants to fill you in on that,
Sure.
what we had.
Yeah, Linda gave me a tour of where things are stored on the first floor in the basement, cellar storage. There's a great deal of material, and a lot of it, I'd say it has been well cared for. So, there's that to be congratulated upon. There are records going back to the 18th century. A lot of records that I see is no longer being active records. As an archivist of 33 years, I might make a recommendation that some of these older records that are no longer used might be better served and found and available to researchers if they were maybe designated, put on loan, or transferred to a different repository, thereby making room for the active records that are accessed and used and needed in town hall, could be better cared for and more accessible without the burden of caring for these no longer active records. So, that's just a cursory conclusion after looking at the records, but I have to say that They've been well cared for. Preservation measures have been taken. The materials are well housed in acid-free, acid-neutral containers and sleeves. So I kudos to the caretakers at Town Hall who have taken care of the records thus far.
Great. Do you or Linda, what do you suggest for next steps here in terms of tackling this?
I just want to mention that I did speak with the the town clerk this afternoon before I left in regards to moving the records. And that is not a viable option. They are by state law, as far as she knows, to be retained at the town level.
Okay.
As the keeper of the records. And that's why they were put to the basement so that they could still be accessed by the public. But they have to be brought up because we don't allow the public in the basement, but that was the easiest place to store them.
One of the things that we've been trying to do is to inventory. I think one of our objectives as the HDC, when this was brought up, was to create an inventory. Could that be a next step?
Well, I assume there is probably an inventory in the town hall. Linda?
I'm not aware of an inventory.
Okay.
I know that they are listed on the boxes, what is there. I think Andrew can agree with me that the boxes should be more of an archival box instead of a paper box, but they're all in acid-free envelopes in there and maybe labeled better.
So would it make sense to, knowing this information now, Andrew, that these aren't likely to go anywhere, would it make sense for the HDC to pull together a few bullet points of recommendations, including storage, environment, inventory, whatever, to make a recommendation to the town manager for how to address this situation?
I think that would be appropriate, yes.
Okay. Would you two, possibly three, be willing to work on that and bring it back to us at our next meeting? Draft back to us for consideration?
Yes.
Okay, Murray, you'll participate if you have thoughts.
Yeah, happy to join in. The other thing that I'll share with you is that there's been two specialists that would love to be able to complement this team. So we've got great resources internally with Linda and Andrew. We also have the curators at the Rhode Island Historic Society who have the specific familiarity with working with town records, as does the state archives, Rhode Island State Archives. They have a specialist who works on just this kind of exercise, which is working with towns on how to best preserve town records. So if either Linda or Andrew feel like that would be helpful, then they're willing to help.
Great. Well, so just a reminder that the three of you can't talk and as a group because you are, I think that's a quorum. I think that's a problem. I think it's right, Brian, am I right? It's only two of us that talk at once. You're, yeah, you need to unmute.
Yeah, at this point, 3 is a quorum, so.
Okay, all right. So be creative in working together without violating open meeting laws.
Okay.
Richard.
I just remind you, it's not a question of creativity. It's a quorum whether you meet 3 together. It's a quorum whether it's communications going around in a circle one at a time.
Yeah.
So be careful.
Okay.
Karen, Rich, any thoughts on this before we move on?
Only that David Nedwertek is going to join us. Does that change the quorum business at all?
It will. That'll bring you up to 6, so you'll have a 4-person quorum.
Good point.
So maybe once he gets active, he's going to be active in a month. He'll be able to be okay with 3.
Right. Good point, Rich. Thanks. Okay, anything else before we move along? I am hopping around because I want to knock a couple easy things off. A quick update on the HGC camp training program. The town received the grant to do the training this fall. We'll all be actively involved, but at the front end of this, Brian and Rich and I will meet next week to divvy out some assignments. Rich is the point person with the National Alliance of Preservation Commissions, which is the training group. I did hear from Ginger Hess, the architect at the RHPHC earlier this week, that she's incredibly excited and grateful to the town for taking this on and for this HDC for taking it on. So there's some excitement already out there. So just keep aware that this is going to be a bit of work on our part. Not a huge amount, I don't believe, but we may be tapping into, each of you a little bit along the way. I would also give a quick update that the South County Art Association, which was also submitting under the sort of umbrella of the town, did not get their grant, which is unfortunate. So Brian, or Rich, anything to add to this topic?
No, only that our contact person apparently has changed at the Preservation Commission, but we'll talk about that on Monday.
Okay, great. Wednesday. Great.
Yeah, Wednesday.
Let's see. Let's go back up to our preservation awards, and now I'll follow in order. Thank you for stepping out of order for a minute. Murray, Karen, preservation awards.
Karen, you want to take it?
No, you can take it.
Okay. So thank you very much for the committee for submitting some nominations. Brian had compiled them and sent them for Karen and I to take a look at. And I think, correct me if I'm wrong, Karen, but our proposal is that we accept all of and remembering what our objectives is with these preservation awards, which is to recognize examples of good preservation practices and to encourage folks to follow suit, as well as to just raise the overall awareness of the importance of historic preservation within the town. So with that in mind, we wanted to recommend that we acknowledge each of the nominations, because the more the merrier. I don't think it's going to dilute the value and the recognition that we give to them. And certainly we can talk about each one of them individually just to allow for comment on the proposal. But that's our general idea, is that we recognize each of them and to see what we can do to publicize them, either through our town's Facebook site or through the local media.
And then I would just add that when you look at the nominees that were given to us, it's very easy to kind of categorize them by residential, commercial, adaptive reuse, natural resources, I think was another one that I thought of. And I think the only one that Murray and I talked about is just with the broad brush Mechanic Street block, that we kind of teased that one out a little bit more and do a little bit more diligence on all of the homes that were nominated. I took a quick ride down that road on Tuesday just to see, just to look at it. But again, it's by lot number, so I didn't have that at the ready as I was driving by, but that's what I would add.
And I just, I will admit that I just listed all of the lots that fronted on Mechanic Street from GIS. So I did not independently go down and verify that there aren't 20th century or 20 built houses there. So
Yeah, when you get down one end of the street, it does get a little bit different down there where there's some like vinyl sided houses, newer type homes. So I think that's why I think we should probably look at that one just a little bit more. But we also talked about some creative ways in which we could kind of celebrate their efforts in maintaining their properties.
And I did have one question, and I'm not sure who submitted the nomination for Peter Potts or the old Mumford Mill. But I had a question around what was being recognized there. I've been there within the last month, and I think it's a great reuse. I just don't know what's been done recently to it.
All right, it's Richard Youngkin. I nominated both of those, Mechanic Street and Peter Potts. What's happened in the last couple of years there is that the ownership has changed from Oliver Green to his son Jeff, and Jeff rebuilt the front entryway and also built a interior desk and sort of orientation space for the cashier to live, and the office. That's an interior space. But basically what he's been doing is maintaining this mid 20th century rehab of the mill as Peter Potts pottery. And even that in and of itself, I thought was commendable, because it is a mid-century modern adaptive reuse by RISD professor of an old fallen down mill in South County, rural South County. So it has all these sort of interesting and different attributes to it, including rehab and including some design that's mid-century modern design. So those are the basic elements. There also has been damage over the years. There was a fire there. The top of the mill burned off. The roof of where the pottery studio is, and that got rebuilt and saved. They saved the operation. So its life from 1950s onward has been this sort of iconic artistic life for the building.
I like that one. I think that's a good one. Other comments or questions? I'd like to ask about 109 Columbia Street, because while I think it's an utterly charming building, and I really do detest when preservation conversations devolve to windows, because I think we've lost so much ground fretting about windows. But I am concerned about the choice of windows on this building, and what a basically an endorsement from the Historic District Commission says about window replacement.
Well, again, I was the one who nominated that, and I can just say in defense of it, at least the windows are not, don't have fake muttons, because they don't have any muttons. They're 1/1 windows. And it is a shame that the original windows were tossed out. I guess my feeling
Or that
is,
better windows weren't chosen for replacement.
yeah, correct. Yeah, correct. So I think that probably what we should do is come to some sort of thought about, and maybe not tonight, but some sort of thought about windows in historic houses and buildings that are not in the historic district, the zoning district, but are in the other districts. And can we be a little soft on them as long as they don't have the fake mutton bars? And by what I mean by fake mutton bars is the ones that are flat, have no reveal or dimensional quality at all, and are sandwiched between two glass panels and are definitely fake and shouldn't be there.
Well, maybe we're being a little bit just like we did in the past, right? Of I can think of when I did the write-up for the Stedman's building. We were pretty specific about what we were commending them on.
Yeah.
And, you know, maybe that's not the part that we're commending them on. We're being very, you know, it's about all the trim on the outside, right? It's about being mindful about going back with wood and maintaining the character and charm of the trim. But we
Yeah.
don't, right? I think we just
Okay.
be very,
I think I could go along with that.
I think we have to be a little flexible with these buildings that are outside the district, but, and
I'm
to
not-
encourage
yeah.
them.
I'm not suggesting inflexibility, but I want us to understand
it's a
the
good
message.
point
we
though.
send.
It's a good point though. I agree with you.
So I
I'm
like the
hoping
idea.
that-
Sorry,
I was
Mary.
just gonna say, I'm hoping that someday that we have other mechanisms for encouraging further design considerations and restoration considerations, like people actually come to us. And Rich and I have a great example of Peter DeStefano, who's reached out to us to talk about his building on Main Street and to get ideas on how to historically preserve an important landmark within our down.
Fantastic.
down the
Yep,
street.
I
Yeah, so
totally
hopefully,
agree.
hopefully we'll find a different way of getting our word out there and making sure people understand that we're a resource for
A
them.
resource, yep. So I do also agree that I think Mechanic Street really needs to be teased out. I get the intent, but I also want to point out that if we don't hone in, we've got 24 property owners being recognized if we do that, if we do Mechanic Street individually. And so I think we need to talk about what this looks like. I think we know May is Preservation Month. One of the things that I talked to a couple of you about is, rather than having a fete, asking our town council to issue, for lack of a better word, Brian, what did you and I talk about? Not proclamations, but, you know, recognition awards, or, you know, having town council.
I would envision you know, a town resolution recognizing, you know, these half a dozen properties or whatever, and allowing somebody from the committee to speak and say a couple of sentences on why each property was recognized without getting too long-winded in detail.
Yeah.
I think on Mechanic Street, just to be very brief about it, there's something that we need to maybe figure out what's going on there, because when I looked at it, what's happened is that the street has maintained its integrity to a large degree. There have been some changes in some of the buildings, and there have been new infill at the end of the street that's actually one of these, I think these environmentally friendly houses that is self-sustainable, passive houses. It fits in. So it's kind of like something's going on there that allows all of this to take place. And it's a very tight neighborhood, I can imagine, because the street's narrow and the houses are close together. So I like the idea of teasing it out, figuring out more about what's happening there. That might be really positive.
Can this happen Brian, well, first of all, how do people feel about this idea of doing a resolution with the town council? It seems to me that it's a fantastic opportunity to get ourselves before our town council.
Yeah, love it. Great idea.
I think it's great.
Everybody comfortable with that?
Yes.
Yeah.
Brian, remind me, you and I talked about it, but I lost it. When would we have to pull together it has something to do with whether it's budget season, and it may be toward the end of May rather than the beginning of May?
I mean, you should be able to get on the agenda with enough notice. I would assume that we will have a final list and maybe a short write-up on each site that I could send to the town manager by the next meeting, which, you know, should give you, let me just.
By our next meeting?
Yes.
Okay, so April 4th, did we say it was?
You said it was April 26th,
I'm looking now. I'm
Tuesday,
looking.
the 26th,
Details.
or is it Thursday, the
The-
28th?
28th.
April 28th.
Okay, so if we have final decision and brief write-up by April 28th, and I think Brian, and you and I talked about, we will pull together a PowerPoint for the presentation, and that can get on the agenda for some time in May. The
Yeah,
town
we should be
council
able to
agenda.
get it on one of the 2 meetings in May, yes. And
All
I,
right.
I will make sure the town manager understands that May is preservation month, and that's the point of shooting to get it on the May agenda. The earlier we can get it to them,
Yep, I
the more
understand.
likely it is that there will be room made for you, so.
Okay, so here's a quick question. What have you, Karen, and whomever else worked on? Rich, I think you worked on these awards in the past. What do you do about owner notification or checking with owners about whether they in fact are agreeable to this? Because I think what we don't want to happen is to, not check with owners. So how did that work?
Yeah, we reached out to them the last time. We
Okay.
individually kind of all took a handful and reached out to them to tell them that they were being recognized.
Okay,
I do know that there was one that we had been considering, Rich, remember, in Matunic, and
Yeah.
the owner had particularly said to us, we don't want
Yes.
recognition, please keep us out of this, but
Right.
everybody else was accepted, we just notified them, we brought them in before the town hall. We
Yeah.
had the Independent there, took some photos,
great.
gave them a plaque, a plaque meaning a frame with a certificate inside.
Yep, perfect.
and that
That's
was
what we're
it.
thinking. Okay,
That was it.
fantastic. Well, I think that,
I certainly have the time to do a lot of this running around and speaking with folks over the next couple of months. So if you need somebody to do the running around, I can volunteer to do that.
great. So who's going to handle Mechanic Street? How are we going to get to a better understanding of Mechanic Street? And because that would be important to bring back in April.
All right, I'll take care of that.
Great, thanks. And so can we anticipate that you guys will have little descriptions written up for each of these, and we'll know that owners are comfortable, and then Brian and I will work together to pull together the town council material.
Sounds like a good plan.
Yep,
And-
great plan.
I'm happy to talk to the owners, the Shepherd's Run and the Jeff Green.
Okay, and I'm happy to do Green Line because I'm in there all the time.
Oh, great.
Yep, happy to do that.
Shepherd's Run and Peter's Pot
Will you
is,
keep the list, Karen?
yeah, Rich, and then your Green Line.
I'll do Green Line.
And then Rich, you're gonna tease out Mechanic Street.
Yeah, just figure out what's going on there.
I can do Stedman's.
I guess I'm on Columbia.
Well, Deglia, Rich, you know Gil and Deglia pretty well. Do you want to?
Yeah, I could do him as well.
Thanks.
Yeah.
Fantastic. Great. Right. Is that everything? You're going to do Columbia. Thank you, Murray.
You got it.
I
Okay.
think Columbia is, just as an aside, a very nice house was torn down on Columbia yesterday next to the church. It's kind of
Yeah.
sad.
So there's probably, it's probably, it would be important. I think I understand why in the context of Columbia it might be important
Yeah.
to recognize.
And I think a young family is in the Columbia Street house, and I
Okay.
think they were out on the street watching the demo.
Ugh.
Oh,
All righty, great. Well, thank you so much, guys. This sounds like it's gonna move forward. Anything else on this before we move to the COA application? All right, we're gonna move to the COA application, certificate of appropriateness application. Brian and I circled around, made some changes, floated it by Rich, made some additional changes. And now you have a draft application in front of you. I know I've heard that there are a couple of wordsmithing requests, which, we'll definitely take care of. But I want to find out if anybody has any larger concerns about the direction the application is going in. Anyone?
I have one thing about
Rich? Yep.
new construction.
Okay.
And it's only that I think new construction can be such a difficult thing for us that we may add into the application some specifics about new construction that we'd be looking for. And yeah, I know that there's a section, I'm trying to find it here, that does talk about photographs. It's under the photographs, and it describes new construction there. It's G2.
Yeah.
And I think that probably could get a little bit more specific about what we may need in terms of the streetscape and drawings that are usually required for HDCs when there's a difficult task of seeing how the building fits in from a massing, scale, and rhythm point of view. So it could be just a phrase in here that also allows Brian to ask for these elevation drawings of the street or photographs that show that, and to be a little bit particular about the kinds of photographs that perhaps the smartphone photograph isn't going to work very well because it distorts things so well.
Right.
And the other thing that we ran into with the new house on South Road, I got particularly peeved about the elevation. This would be the plan that had the elevation contours on it, and that the engineer had chosen to use his own base, just a nominal 100 feet, and scale up from that, which was very confusing to me anyway, and I'm used to looking at drawings. So we have GIS, we have USGS topo maps. I think we could require that the engineer, whoever's doing that kind of a drawing for us, show the real topography so we can look at the other GIS maps and see where we are and not have to extrapolate the numbers.
On a Saturday morning with
On a
a
s- yeah.
with a 25-foot tape.
Right.
Yeah.
So, and there's, I think that project brought to point that there's some drainage issues that can develop, as well as site issues and aesthetic, or appearance issues that we're concerned about. But we certainly want to be mindful of drainage issues as well. And the topo means a lot up and down, how the building sits up or sits down.
I see Brian's hand. Rich, are you done?
Yeah.
That's okay. I'm going to come back to you in a minute, Brian.
Yes, so I had a couple of suggestions on those things. One, I think we ought to move the asterisk at the bottom of the photograph section and maybe just put that at the heading so that it applies to all of section G, that we can ask for additional material if required.
It was there. I moved it. Put it back.
Oh,
I think I moved it. Sorry.
And we could add another bullet to section 3 requesting streetscape drawings, where, depending on the setting where required. A lot of things may not require streetscape.
Yeah.
But we could insert that there. So far as the topography, I want to point out that the topography on the plans for South Road was the real surveyed topographic information for that lot. The USGS and GIS topography is very generalized. Looking at it on our GIS system, while it gives you a very generalized concept of what topography is doing in a given area, remember that you're layering things up and that those layers are not necessarily keyed to one another very accurately. So you're layering topography over an aerial, over an appraiser's map, and it may not create an accurate picture of what's going on there, except in a very generalized fashion. So whatever you get in the project plans is going to be much more accurate to what's going on there.
Well, Brian, I think, and just to interrupt you a minute, I think you misinterpreted what I said. The topography there was, they just used 100 feet to start with. And that's not what the topo is there. It's not at 100 feet. It's like higher than that. I understand the fact that their topography, if you took the lines, is probably at a interval that's more accurate than the GIS. I just want the base elevation to be accurate. If it's 150 feet or 200 feet, I want it to say 200 feet. That's the real topography above sea level, not 100 feet. That's what's confusing about it. And you can't compare that with the GIS or the USGS maps, because the USGS map is saying 200 feet and the engineer is saying it's 100 feet. It doesn't make any sense. So, and we're lay people, we're not engineers. So we want it to be reading like it is in real world. And that if the actual sea level topography above sea level is 250 feet, we want to know that on that drawing. We don't want it to say 100 feet above sea level. They typically are using a base of 100 feet and they're going up from that on their lines.
I understand where you're coming from. I think my inclination would be to speak with the town engineer and building inspector as to what the standard building practices are.
Doesn't matter to me what standard is. It's what we require on our drawings. And we also have other requirements we've had in the past about north-south arrows, orientation of the drawings.
Well, those are all standard planning requirements. I mean, those should be on every drawing.
Right.
I have, I'm looking at this like a homeowner rather than an HDC.
Yep.
Section F, I'm just like, I challenge us to say, is the homeowner actually going to circle all those, standards or not? I wonder if we should be pointing them to the page numbers of the standards to look at for that particular bucket of. So for instance, instead of saying section 6 guidelines for demolition, there's a box there that says demolition. Please refer, look at page 25 in the current application and review the guidelines 67. I just wonder if they're, I just wonder if they're just going to go through every standard. I get where you're going. It really educates them on reading what they need to do. That's just one comment. And then I wonder, under maps and drawings and building material information, I wonder if we could almost make it like a checkbox.
Where are you now? Oh, okay. 4, last page.
Yeah, under maps and drawings and even under building material, I wonder if we made it more of a checkbox, right?
I actually like that idea. Yeah.
Does your application, please include building materials, manufacturer lit, spec sheet, blah, blah, blah. You know what I mean? As opposed to, it's a big long paragraph with just a
lot of text. I like that idea. Brian, why don't you and I tease that out together? Okay. How do other people feel about that idea? Does that make sense?
Yeah, it makes sense to me.
Yes.
Just to go back to the standards and guidelines, we're struggling with this, Karen, as you know. We're struggling to make it abundantly clear to applicants that they got to pay attention. So we're trying to figure out a creative way to lead the horse to water without having this be a 10-page application. So let's just take section 1, general standards for preservation rehab, and we've got C standards 1 through 22. Maybe can we add the page numbers parenthetically there? Is that enough of, does that get you a little closer to what you want?
Is this going to be online? Because is that how they're going to get this application, or they're still filling out a paper copy?
I think ideally it should be fillable. I think we talked about that, Brian, didn't we?
Yeah, we'll see if we can convert it into some sort of electronic fillable form. I agree that's the goal.
Yeah, yeah.
Okay, because I'm thinking like if you selected that you're doing demo, it automatically kind of pops up the 67
Do
through
the link.
77,
You
right?
link right to the guide.
Yeah.
That's an interesting idea. Okay, so link to the standards and guidelines.
Yeah,
Handbook.
and I just, like, it says section 6, guidelines for demolition, as opposed to just saying demolition. Like, are you, look at below,
Yep.
which one are
Yep.
you doing?
Yep.
And then it links to, it refer to page, 20, or whatever I
Yeah.
said, 25.
Yep. Yep.
And then maybe you're saying, below that, look at all these standards. I don't know.
That's helpful.
Just kind of coming at it from somebody that would have to fill this out.
No, that's great.
The other thing you could attach to that, which would be kind of cool, in the original publication of this, which I have, there were separate requirements for demolition in terms of submission items. There's a whole list of things they had to, demolition applications. There were 4 paragraphs that describe different things that had to be submitted to comply with the demolition standards. And that was true for parking lots, for fences, for windows and doors, for re-roofing projects, and cemeteries, oddly enough. Somehow all this got deleted out of the, after I finished the project, got deleted out of the application itself. Never made it into the application form, I guess. But
why don't you can you scan and send that to Brian so he can look and share it with me, and he and I can go back and.
But what I was going to say is that if you did come up with the standards under demolition, also what would pop up would be the specific application requirements, submission requirements. And then you'd have your general requirements.
Okay. All right, that's all very helpful. Other comments, thoughts?
The only other comment I have is, and I don't want to monopolize this, but what happens if it's not complete, this application form? What happens if it's submitted and it doesn't, half of it's filled out and it's signed?
If it hasn't been completely filled out, I can reach out to them and say, I don't believe your application is complete. I believe it needs X, Y, and Z. And from there, it can go in one of 2 directions. The person can comply with the request and submit the additional information, or the person can say, that's my application. And then it goes to you. And if the board believes it's not complete and they haven't provided the information necessary, you deny the application. But there is no mechanism for us to return or not accept an application based on completeness. And I believe Andy Tights has made that clear in previous meetings. We don't have the same rules about that process that the planning board has.
So would that mean that at each meeting, we would actually go through the applications as a commission, because this has to be done by the commission, not by a subcommittee of the commission? Is that correct? We'd have to go through the applications and determine whether or not they're complete? And then we could vote on denying them?
You would review the application just as you would any other application. And a grounds for denial would be a vote that it was incomplete and lacked information. You know, I would hope to be able to encourage them to update an application and to provide all the necessary information to get a substantive decision from the board. But I don't have a mechanism to compel them to do it, or to tell them we're not going to give them a decision within the statutory time frame because their application isn't complete.
So if they fail to give us the information we need, we can deny it. And I think
Yes.
what Tight said was that we could postpone the decision. We could put them on notice that we're going to continue. What would it be? That we're either going to deny this now, or if you consent to a continuation, we will hear it with the additional information.
So the way the statute reads is you have 45 days from the date of submission to issue a decision. You have the option to extend that once for an additional 45 days. Of course, if the applicant agrees to a delay, you can extend further that way as well. If an applicant doesn't agree and they submit an application and say, I want a decision based on this, you have to give them a decision based on that.
Yep. And you're presumably going to be advising them that it could be a denial.
Right, and I'll also be advising them that that denial stays in place for a year and they can't just turn around and file a new complete application once they have a decision. They're stuck for a period of time.
So I think going forward, I don't want to go too long on this, but we should have some mechanism within the agenda to actually determine whether these are complete enough to review before we waste a lot of time on them.
What do you mean on the agenda?
Well, the application comes up on the agenda. Let's say it's the first project that you review. There's a question that's given to the commission. Do you all agree that this is a complete application?
Okay.
If I object and say it's not a complete application, then we go through, what we have to do so we don't waste a lot of time on it.
Yeah, I agree. All righty, we're getting close to 7:30. I'm hoping we can wrap up by then because we've actually had the luxury of a couple of hours tonight because planning board was canceled. Any other comments on the application while we're on that topic? Linda.
I just wanted to say that going back to section F, I think initially I wanted to say that this was, know your intentions was to make them read the historic district's home rulers guidelines. And I think it's a really good way of putting it out. You're giving them the standard, you're giving them the sections to look in.
Mm-hmm.
I also agree now listening that if you had bullets, not links, if it was online, that would help.
Yep. I think it's a great idea.
And just going back to Rich's elevations, I think engineers, they use 100 as a baseline. I don't know of any other ones that they use actual elevations. They use elevation 100 as their base and work from there up or down. So that's why you're not going to see on plans the actual elevation from sea level.
That's my understanding as well.
Well, you understand what the problem is. If we're looking at adjacent properties and we don't have their elevations, we have like 295 or whatever for their base elevation. It's really hard to know, to extrapolate what you're looking at.
I think a lot of the engineers give you a base going out from other properties. They don't, on the big picture, they don't give you just that property's elevations. They put them on their surveys, but they actually get the elevations of other properties.
What if we were to require that any abutting property's base elevation be shown on the site plan?
I think you could do that. I think that would work.
Rich?
Well, I don't understand why they wouldn't just put it on their own plan as well. I'm wondering about this because I've reviewed a lot of site plans for subdivisions, and I don't remember seeing elevations that weren't accurate to the real world.
All right,
So-
so this is a to be ferreted out a little bit. Brian, you're gonna talk with the building official and others, and we're gonna kind of work through. Thank you, Linda, that was helpful. If we can move on from this application, we clearly still have some work to do on it, but I think we're getting closer, and this has been a really helpful discussion, actually. Let's do a quick, really brief Murray update on the GIS database work you've been doing. And then I'll give a quick, make a quick comment about an inventory.
I don't know that we've made any progress since we met last. It's, as I had reported before, we've got, let's say 80%, Brian's got something he's going to add to it, about 80% of the addresses that are, that have been added for each of the items that are included in the 1984 report. So Brian, whatever you have is the latest and greatest.
Yeah, so I've been working with Carol Baker, our GIS administrator. She has been able to create a spreadsheet and a geodatabase based on data that she got from the RIHPHC. The problem that she has right now is that there are duplicate entries for each location because of the way they've laid out their database tables. We need to reorganize the table a little bit so that we only have one data point for each property. She did, let me see if I can pull it up really quickly. Where did she put it? Oh, she made a, so let me, as soon as this comes up, I'll show you what we have. And eventually what we'd like to do is cross-reference this to the information in the existing survey. So I'm going to share this. So this is the data that she's collected. The magic number is over here on the left-hand side, which is an individual number assigned by the Historical Preservation and Heritage Committee that we can link to. And you'll see, just looking at the first two, you can see that 688 Matunic Beach Road has 2 entries because the lines, one line is state register, the other line is national register. These should really be broken out into 2 separate columns instead of rows, so that you only have one number for 668 Matunic Beach Road.
Yep.
So there's a little bit of, should I say, database grunt work that needs to go on to clean this up to make it work. And then we would also decide on, you know, what are the extra columns that we need to add to this database to link it to the entries that we have in the 1984 survey. So I was just thinking that we have at least 2 columns that I could think of, which would be 1984 street address and then 1984 item code, because each entry in the survey has its own coding from that coding system that's in there. And that hopefully that will eventually give us a solid current database that we can use in GIS to mark all these sites that people can also use to cross-reference to the old book. And Carol also suggested that there may be a way at some point that we could take the property descriptions and actually link them to each entry as well.
Brian, where did the addresses come from in this file here?
These all come out of the current E911 database, so these are all current. Now, bear in mind that these are not all street addresses. Some of these, she was pointing out to me, here, Peacedale Manufacturing System. So these are areas, not structures. Some in here are, they have multiple places on the same property. The whole URI, every structure on the URI quad is listed as the same area. So there's some cleanup work that we need to do here to get it to work correctly. So once we get that figured out, if we have some volunteers, we can break this list down and give people instructions for what they need to do, and then put the pieces back together. There are over 800 things on this list currently that only really reflect 300 or 400 locations. So there's a lot of junk in here.
All right. I think that's great that we've got this information. It sounds like, Brian, you're going to do a little bit more cogitating on what approach makes the most sense to you. And maybe you'll come back to us in April.
Yeah, Carol and I are going to sit down and go through this and try and decide what needs to be added and what needs to be cleaned up, and how to delegate that work out.
So I have a question. You don't have the 1984 address on here. You just got the new address, correct?
Just the current E911 address. We would need to, that's going to have to be manually inserted because we don't have an electronic database of those old addresses.
Well, that's what
Murray
Murray did that. Murray has
Right.
an Excel sheet that has that.
So we may be able to cross-link that. I mean, Murray, if you can go through your database and add these identifiers in the first column, then we can use that column to link the two databases together.
Yeah, I should be able to do that.
Cool. So any other questions for Brian or Murray about this ongoing project? Brian, anything else to add?
Nope, that's about it.
Hey, Shanti, one thing
Yeah.
that you had made a great suggestion last time we talked on this, that we might be able to schedule somebody from the State Historic Preservation Organization, perhaps in the summertime. Is that something that we want to reach out to them? And
So I think that gets to point 2.6.2, planning for a resurvey of the town's inventory. This is something Brian and I started talking about that would basically be a logical next step once we have sorted through this address issue. And thinking about perhaps for our 2023 certified local government grant application to go forward and update our 1984 survey. And so, Murray, I think what you and I talked about was having someone from our HPHC come down sooner rather than later, sometime perhaps late spring or early summer, to meet with us, perhaps during one of our meetings, and explain what their approach is in terms of updating survey material at this point, and what recommendations they would make, what parameters we'd have to follow. And hopefully they will be in a place where it's a very more modern procedure than what happened 30 years ago. Hopefully we can use all the bells and whistles that we know are available with technology to help us do this. But it would be a grant that we apply for through the RHPHC to hire a consultant. This isn't volunteer work, although there might be elements of it that can be augmented with volunteer help. But it would really, I think, Rich, you may know whether any community has updated their original survey book in Rhode Island, and I think that hasn't happened.
I think you're correct. What they've been doing are small thematic or geographically confined surveys. I think there's going to be a focus. There was in this round of CLGs, there was a focus on mid-century and modern and other topics that go beyond just a simple upgrade. So what we might be able to do is sort on which one would be most attractive to do, or where we have a threat. I think that they would also consider a neighborhood that's threatened, or a National Register historic district. Unfortunately, we have ours pretty well designated, and geographically they haven't changed too much, but they, if one was threatened or if there was something going on with one, like Main Street was basically an upgrade of the survey. We just completed that a couple of years ago. But a town-wide survey, that's a big deal. That's expensive, requires probably some professional guidance or being done completely by a professional consultant. It's not that we can't somehow bolster our existing survey with additional information that we gather,
Right.
and coordinate that somehow.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So more to come on that. I think we've got plenty on our plate just right now, but it's certainly something, if we decide is worth pursuing in early 2023, we'd need to get some ducks in a line. Brian, anything to add on that?
No.
Okay. I would propose we just kick the can of the comp plan down to into April so that we can end this meeting soon. Everybody in agreement on holding on that conversation? Such happiness in people's faces. Brian, any correspondence or update from you, items 7 and 8?
No, nothing other than the items that were, already attached to the agenda.
Okay. Our next meeting is, as we all heard a number of times, Thursday, April 28th. And I anticipate that we likely will need to meet, because I'm guessing we probably will have something to discuss with respect to Kingstown Road. And if not, I think it would be important in terms of the preservation awards and our C of A application and moving those things forward. And if Linda and Murray and Andrew are amenable, recommendations that would help us with a letter to the town council regarding the town records. Anything else on anybody's mind that we want to think about for April? Okay, is there a motion to adjourn?
I'll give you two motions.
Okay, is there a second? Oh, there's a second. Who seconded? Karen and Karen? Is there a second?
A second.
Thank you, Linda. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Thank you.
Any opposed? Anybody want to stay longer? Andrew, you look like you want to stay longer.
Andrew looks comfortable.
Yeah.
Go, Andrew.
Thank you, everyone, and thank you. We'll see you soon and be in touch.
Thank you.
if
Thank you,
have-
Shanti. Thank you.
All righty.
Good night, everybody.
Bye.
Good night.
Thank
Thanks,
you,
Brian.
Brian.
Good night.
Night.